Hello, welcome to our Wednesday webinar for the month of April, a topic that when we started putting these together last summer was one we never dreamed we would have. But we're so glad that you're here with us today. I'm Mila Tappan from the Finance Authority of Maine, and with me today is Jessica Whittier. And so Jess is going to be doing the second half of the presentation. And then we have Maria McDougall with us as well. Maria will be watching for your questions and answering some of them or providing them to us so that we can try to answer them, and any we don't get to, we will respond to in writing. So first of all, we hope that you are all doing well. We know this has been a really difficult time for everyone, and we can't imagine everything you guys are trying to work out in your own lives. So, but we're really glad that we could be together today and spend an hour or so together. We do have a lot of material to get through today, so we're probably going to move ahead pretty quickly, but as always, you can reach out to any of us at any point in time via email, phone, Zoom meeting, and we're here to help in any way that we can. I would love to have you ask your questions in the Q&A panel. So I know there's a chat feature, but we like them in the Q&A if you can do that, because the way we get them on the back end works much better for us. So if you're asking in the Q&A, that's going to work better. But we'll take a question any way we can get it. But that really does help. Let's see. We also wanted to be sure that you knew that the information that we're going to be providing today is the information to the way that we understand it. There's so many moving pieces. There's new information every single day. We're absolutely doing our best to stay up to speed and be sure that we're communicating with you all of the important information. But every now and then we have found that, okay, we thought we understood how something was working, and we found out that it's a little bit different. So just keep that in mind, and we will update information as it changes. And then last but not least, before we dive into the presentation, I did want to let you know that if you go to the FAME website, famemaine.com, you're going to see right down at the bottom in orange, there's information about COVID-19 and things related to FAME. So there you can click on that, and whether someone's looking for something on the business side of the house or on the education side of the house, there are links to all of that. And we do have an FAQ out there that has a lot of the information that we're going to talk about in this PowerPoint. So, and we will continue to update that as well. All right, so my tired old eyes are going to let Jess and Maria not be shown. I think that's what I'm trying to do. It's, there we go, stop video. There we go. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about today is we are going to talk about the impact on student loans, because that's one of the biggest impacts that we're seeing. And then, even though it's not in our area of expertise, we are going to talk about economic impact payments, because they do impact virtually everybody, and especially our core constituency. So we wanted to be sure that we did talk a few moments about that. We're going to talk about what we want college and high school students to know. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some fabulous education, financial education resources that exist. And then we're going to kind of turn a little bit of a corner, at which point Jess will take over, and we're going to talk about what we can just be doing for students now, looking towards the future, trying to find that positive note. We're going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA and how we can be helping students plan for higher education, even in these times that are so unpredictable. So with that, let me just get started by talking about federal student loans. So when we are working with students and they're talking about borrowing, you know, we always say borrow federal student loans first if you need to borrow at all. And it's the reason is that there's, you know, there are benefits. And if there was a time when it was clear that these loans are different than any other loans out there, it is now. Because with federal student loans, it was one of the first pieces where significant action was taken. And at the moment, all federally held student loans, and I'm going to give you a definition of what that means in a moment, all federally held student loans, there is a freeze on the interest. No interest is accumulating on any of those federally held student loans. And that includes both enrolled students, currently enrolled students, and borrowers in repayment. So it's everybody for federally held loans. And additionally, payments are suspended on all of these loans through September 30th, 2020. And what's nice about this is that the students don't have to do anything. Borrowers don't have to do anything. At least that's the intention, that automatically their payments are suspended and no interest is accruing. So that's just, you know, a burden or worry that people can, you know, at least temporarily put aside. Another important piece to know is that borrowers who are in income-based repayment plans, especially we're thinking about those who are doing public service loan forgiveness, those months of suspended payments do count towards their qualifying payments, even if they're not making them. So what we mean by that is that with public service loan forgiveness, students have to make 120 qualifying payments in order to have be eligible for forgiveness under that program. So these next couple of months, well, I think it's 6 total, will absolutely continue to count towards that 120. So that's really good news. You know, they're not having to make a decision. Do I keep making payments so I stay on track? No, they even can have their payments suspended and are okay in terms of it's not undermining their forgiveness that will come down the road, hopefully. And the same is true as far as suspension of all activity on federal student loans that are in default. So we have a lot of students out there, unfortunately, who are struggling with default. Involuntary collections on, again, all federally held, I'll get to that in a moment, loans are deferred until September 30th. So this includes wage garnishment, tax refunds, and we have had so many students that we're working with that, you know, I hate to call it a silver lining, but, you know, in these very difficult times, being able to say to them, you know, no, you are going to get your tax refund back is making a world of difference to them. So that's really something important that we want students who are in default to know if they haven't realized it already. And any garnishment of any of their federal benefits like Social Security, all of that is suspended until September 30th at least. And, you know, I saw something today about some discussions about that going even further out, but I don't think we're there yet. So we'll just keep an eye on that. But for right now, those all of that is suspended until September 30th. So when we talk about federally held student loans, what does that mean? So first of all, everyone who has a direct loan, that is a federally held loan. So if you're someone who borrowed for the first time federal student loans, or someone in your life borrowed federal student loans for the first time after 2010, that is when all loans went direct. So basically, if you've got a student and they borrowed for the first time in 2013 or 2017, we know that all of their loans are direct loans. Their federal loans are direct loans, and those are federally held, okay? So they're all set. But what we also have is that we have some people who borrowed federal student loans through probably what you would think of as the Stafford Loan Program, although that name has been used in ways that aren't appropriate. But when I was working at UMaine all those years ago, we had students who were borrowing from their private lenders. They were federally guaranteed loans. They were Stafford loans under the Family Federal Education Loan Program. And the issue with those loans is that those loans are not necessarily held by the federal government. They may still be held by a different lender, a different organization. The same is true of Perkins loans. For students who had Perkins loans, technically the school often was the lender, was always the lender. And in some cases, those loans have moved back to the federal government, usually when the student goes into default, to be honest. But most of the time, the schools still hold those federal Perkins loans. So they're not federally held, okay? So we've got a group of old FFEL loans that are what we call commercially held, and we've got Perkins loans that are held by the individual schools. Those loans are not having interest suspended or payments suspended. If a student has that type of loan that's not covered under these provisions, then what they need to do is they need to reach back to their school or to their servicer and let them know if they're having difficulty making payments. There are potentially still accommodations that could be made, but it is going to be up to the holder of their loan. Now, I am hearing discussion, you know, just all the stuff that I'm reading, that people are aware of this and that this is a problem. And so future legislation may address this. But for now, any people who have these FFEL loans that are commercially held or Perkins loans that are held by the school, we don't want them to stop, doing anything. They need to take action, either to make their payments if they're still able to, or reach back out to their servicer and have a conversation if they're not able to. So even though the language talks about federally held student loans, Parent Plus loans are included in these provisions of suspension of payments and suspension of interest, again, so long as they're federally held. So any Plus loans that are more recent and, over the last, decade, basically, those loans are included in this. Those payments are suspended, as is the interest. But if a parent is repaying a loan that was from, 2005 and it was through a commercial lender, again, they can't just stop doing anything. They need to contact the servicer if they can't make payments or continue to make payments. And I'm sure we're going to have some questions on this. So please ask if that was not clear. The best way to determine whether or not a loan is federally held is to go to studentaid.gov. Just as a quick aside, studentaid.gov has done a lot of work in the last several months. They've taken many of their websites, including studentloans.gov, and they've combined it all into studentaid.gov. And it really is a good website with a ton of information. So students can go to studentaid.gov, they can log in, but they need that FSA ID. And once they log in, they can see their loans, and they can see who not only the owner, the lender is for their loan, they can also see who the servicer is for their loan. So that's a great way to get information if there's, any confusion as to whether a loan is federally held or not. Go to that site and log in. Now, if a student didn't have an FSA ID, so let's just say a student borrowed loans, 15 years ago, and they've just been working with their servicer, good chance that that's probably commercially held. But if they wanted to just log into the federal student aid site but never had an FSA ID, they had a PIN, not an FSA ID, they can go create an FSA ID now and be able to go in and see that information. I think all of us would say visiting the studentaid.gov site on a regular basis is a really good idea anyway, just to see what information is out there, and there are some great tools related to repayment of loans. So students who are unsure about whether or not their loans are federally held can log into the website and get that information. Or if they don't want to do that or can't do that, they can just call the 1-800-433-3243 number, and that will connect them with federal student aid, and federal student aid can help them work through that and figure out what they need to do, if anything. Because again, for the students who have federally held loans, that suspension is happening automatically. Anyone else needs to take action if they're not able to make their payments, okay? Out on the federal student aid website as well, there is an FAQ on the coronavirus and forbearance and all sorts of great information that is getting updated regularly. So it's a great thing to check out, and it's a great thing to check out regularly because additional information is being added. Additionally, there's something called studentaidpandemic.org, brand new site, which has student aid related information that's also a really, really good source of information for people who are looking for some additional details related to student loans. So what do students who have non-federally held or private loans do? So I've already kind of addressed the loans that are, not held by the federal government but are federal loans. Go to your servicer. The same is true with any private loans out there. So if we have individuals who have borrowed through a private, lender, whoever that might be, the expectation at the moment is that they're continuing to make their payments. There's been no broad action for all of those loans. Now, if someone's having trouble making payments, they should be contacting their servicer to see what options exist. But in making that decision and talking with their servicer, it's really important to understand what's happening. So yes, a servicer might say you can take a break from making your payment, but interest is going to be accruing. That actually would be typical. It's very unusual for on loans not to have interest be accruing. So what I would want students to be sure of is if they're in a place where they have loans that are not federally held, but all of these other loans, they really want to make that decision carefully as to, can they continue to make payments? If they can, maybe they should. even though they potentially could have the, a little bit of a break on them. And it's because interest is accruing. So I think that really has to be an individual decision. Some people are continuing to work and can make their payments, but if you can't, reach out to your servicer, have that conversation, but just be really clear as to what's happening with the interest and how long is that deferment for, okay? And then at FAME, we do have some loans that we administer. Those loans include the Maine Medical Association loan, Educators for Maine, Maine Dental Education loan, Maine Veterinary Medicine loan, and the Health Professions Loan Program. So if a borrower has borrowed through any of these programs and is having any difficulty making payments, again, they want to call us directly at FAME. They can call the customer service team. They're working remotely for the most part, except for our dear Jennifer Lanfear. She's the person on that side of the house who's still physically in the office. But you can call the 1-800 number and press option 1, and they will talk with you about what your options are, and then you can make a decision going forward about how to proceed with those particular loans. All right, before we move on, Maria, is there a question that you think we need to address now related to student loans, or are we good to have me continue on?
We do have a couple of good questions. I knew that was going to happen with this audience.
Yeah, I figured.
So I can't start my own video, but as long as everyone can hear me, that will be fine.
I can start you up.
That's why I put my face in there for when folks can't hear. So we had a great question. Can students still make payments if they are able on their federal loans?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, they absolutely can. So it's kind of the reverse for them. So those federally held student loans, what students need to do if they want to continue making payments, they're working, they just really want to get that debt paid down. And additionally, they're having it all go to principal right now. They absolutely can do that. They just need to reach out to their servicer because otherwise that's not going to happen. But they absolutely can. And for those who can afford to, it's a great idea.
I'm in that camp. That's what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take advantage of no interest. And a related question, which is also great for the group to hear, is I thought that no payment was only done if you were to call and activate it. So I think that was how it initially started, but now it's blanket for everyone, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where there was some initial action that was kind of one thing. And so I didn't even talk about that, right? And that's what I meant by there's so many things that are changing regularly, but where we stand today, those borrowers with federally held student loans, as a result of the CARES Act, their payments are automatically being suspended. So no action is required for students who have those federally held loans.
Great. And there is another question, but I am going to wait because I believe we will address it.
Okay, great. All right. I'm just going to leave you out, Maria. I like seeing you there. So just know that you're still on. Makes me feel like I'm not talking to only myself. So now I want to go on and talk about the economic impact payments. We call them stimulus checks. We call them rebates. I've heard them called Corona cash, which is my least favorite thing. But basically, these are the payments that we've been hearing a lot about on the news. This topic, like I mentioned, is not within our area of expertise. We're certainly not tax people, but we do think it's so important and impacts the people that we work with so much that we wanted to be sure we did mention it. So the basic eligibility criteria you're probably familiar with, that U.S. residents who have an adjusted gross income of under $75,000 or married couples with under $150,000 are eligible for these funds as long as they meet certain pretty liberal criteria. So the individual will be eligible for $1,200, married couples for $2,400 based on their income. Now, there are a couple of key things, and I'm going to come back to this in a moment. In order to be eligible for this, though, you cannot be a dependent of another taxpayer. So again, I will come back and talk about that in more detail because that's one of the things that we're not sure people are aware of and is having a huge impact on many of the students that we work with. Additionally, you do also need to have a work-eligible Social Security number. In addition to the $1,200 or $2,400, individuals may be eligible for $500 per child. But the big surprise, I think, with this one is that's for children who are 16 or under. So for the purposes of this, and it's tied to other, tax-related policy, a 17-year-old is not considered a child for this purpose. It's 16 or under in order to get that additional $500. Individuals or couples who earn more than the amounts listed there may still be eligible for some. In the case of individuals up to $99,000, in the case of couples, $198,000, but the amounts will be decreasing. So there's really good information on the IRS site about this, so you can look at that a little bit further. Eligibility is based on the adjusted gross income from the most recent taxes on file. So for everyone who's done their 2019 taxes, that's what they're going to look at. If you haven't done your 2019 taxes, because those have been, the deadline's been extended, so even though today is April 15th and everyone normally would have had to meet today as the deadline, that has been extended until July. So for people who haven't filed, your 2018 tax return is going to be looked at to determine your eligibility. Funds are also potentially available to those who have no income, or those who have incomes that from non-taxable means such as SSI or Social Security. So it's not only tax filers. For matter of fact, we're going to talk about non-tax filers in just a moment. But if you're one of those individuals or have people in your life, I'm thinking about my mom who gets her Social Security every month. She's fine. They are looking at her. She meets the eligibility criteria, and she doesn't file taxes. She doesn't need to. They already know who she is and have a method of getting payments to her. So she and others in those categories are in good shape as far as that is concerned. When this was first announced, I think it's only been, 2 weeks maybe, but seems like a lifetime ago, there was a big question about non-tax filers. So what was going to happen with those people who weren't getting, SSI or Social Security or any federal benefits directly, so there was no direct deposit information or any of that on file, but yet they were people who didn't have to file a tax return. Their incomes were such that they didn't need to, and so maybe they weren't. So initially we were talking about having those people file taxes just to be sure that they could be considered for this. But as of, I think it was Friday, it was the first day I saw it, out on the IRS website, they've added something new. So if you or someone is normally a non-tax filer, what you can do is simply go out to the site and input pieces of information. You can see the eligibility criteria there. You can put in information, and what this is basically doing is allowing the IRS to take a look at your information and consider whether or not you're eligible for these payments. And it also allows you the opportunity to provide them with your direct deposit, there we go, direct deposit information or other information so that they can actually get the money to you, because that was the thing we were worried about with non-tax filers who weren't getting other federal benefits, is that the IRS wouldn't know who they were or how to reach them or how to get the money to them. So this is what non-tax filers should do. They should go to this site and only this site to provide this information. One of the things, as I'm sure we're all concerned about, is there are scammers out there doing things, taking advantage of people. So, people should not be providing this information over the phone or anything like that. They just need to go to this website and provide that information about their non-tax filers, about their circumstances, and then the delivery method for those payments. Okay. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we realized pretty early on that there was a large group of the people we work with who are not going to be eligible for these economic impact payments. And basically, if anyone is claimed as a dependent on someone else's taxes, they are not eligible to receive that. So what that means, and I'll be perfectly honest, most of us, or a lot of us that work at FAME, have kids, and many of us have kids that are college age. So so we started asking some questions about, even thinking about our own kids. And so sure enough, my Noah, who's 20, we claim him as a dependent. So because we claim him as a dependent, he is not eligible for his own stimulus check. Additionally, he doesn't meet the criteria of a child because he's not 16 or younger. And so he's not eligible for the $500 payment. So we know we have a huge number of college students out there who are just, maybe hoping that they're going to get this check and not realizing that they're not going to if their parents claim them as a dependent. And it doesn't mean that all parents of college students are claiming them as a dependent. That's not a given. But I do think a high proportion of parents are likely still claiming their children as dependents. So if you've got a student in that situation, that's the question to ask is, did your parents or someone else claim you on their tax return? And if they did, unfortunately, they're not going to be eligible for any of these funds. And
just for clarification, there was a question that I think we want to address is that even if that student filed their own tax return, if they're still claimed as a dependent.
Exactly.
So that did pop up, and I just wanted to make sure we addressed that.
Yeah, no, I'm awfully glad that you mentioned that, Maria. And again, thinking about Noah, that's exactly the circumstance, right? So initially we're thinking he's good to go. He files his own tax return, but no, because he is claimed on our tax return, even though he has his own separate one. Therefore, he's not eligible for that. And then one of the things that came after that was the realizing, that definition of what a child is. And so we've got a whole bunch of high school seniors out there, maybe even juniors in some cases, who are already, they're 17. And one of the questions, and I just said something because I know I'm going to prompt a question by that. I'm not sure when you had to be 16. So I think it's at the end of the tax year, but I would have to, I don't know the answer to that for sure. But let's just assume we know that they are, 18 now and they're a high school senior, they're not eligible for any of these funds either.
And just one more clarification on this. So the students, are college students who are the poorest of the poor and they're claimed by their parents, they're not getting it. But their parents will get their $1,200 each if they filed a tax return.
Yes.
They just don't get the additional $500 for the child.
Right. So we've got a college student and let's just say mom and dad are at home. Mom and dad potentially can get $2,400. No one will get any money on behalf of that specific child. Okay. And even though I've tended to think about it in terms of college students and high school seniors, because those are who we work with a lot, this applies to any adult who's claimed by somebody else. So, the other day I was hearing something about a mom who, her son, lives with her and is an adult, but she claims him on her taxes. We have, parents in some cases who are living with, their adult children, and their adult children are claiming their parents on their tax return. So that's the key, is someone else can claim you. You're an adult, but someone else claims you, you're not eligible. And then I did hear this in an NCAN video that DACA students and those with temporary protective statuses are potentially eligible because they have an eligible work-approved Social Security number. However, and this is getting a little bit in the weeds, if they're in a household of mixed status, no one in the household is eligible. So if, for example, we had a student who was a US citizen and eligible for these funds, but someone in their household wasn't, my understanding from what I heard from NCAN was that no one in the household would be eligible. So I have a feeling that could prompt some questions. I will be perfectly honest, I would need to research, and I have some, but I'm having trouble finding more details on this. But I did want to throw it out there because I know we have some students who might be in that particular situation. So as far as the delivery method and time frame, the funds will be delivered in whatever way the method is on file. So we have ours direct deposited. My kids, for whatever reason, have never set that up, and they just get a check. So they will, not that they're going to get the money, but if they were, they get the check. We will get direct deposit because that's the way we're already set up. Funds started being deposited, I think on Saturday. We're starting to hear that people are actually seeing those funds either actually in their account or pending. So that's very good news. Those are for the people who have direct deposit though. Paper checks are going to start to be sent out at the end of April is our understanding. And in both cases, what they're going to be doing is processing people with the lowest incomes first, and then continuing on up through those higher income amounts. So especially with the paper checks, if we have people who are, near the top of those income eligibility categories, and they're getting a paper check, they will be the last group to actually receive any funds. And we've heard that could be, into the summer, for example. But others are seeing the funds and should continue to see the funds coming soon. Okay, so I'll stop there, Maria. Were there any other questions related to that section before we go on?
We do have a few about tax implications. I'm not sure that we will be able to answer them, and I'm not sure what you've read because this is changing moment over moment.
So I'm happy to say something, but this is a category where I feel like I'm repeating what I've heard, that I don't feel like I've seen the original source material, okay? But what I understand is this is actually a rebate from our 2020 taxes. So that this is not a loan. This is not us just getting our 2020 tax return early. My understanding is it has no impact on our taxes for 2020. It literally is just money that the federal government is distributing to its citizens, and the method that they're using is just through the tax return service. The one group of people that I've heard that just want to be a little bit aware that could be caught off guard is, for example, if we were in a situation where we made $149,000 in 2019, right? So we thought we qualified for the full 2,400 as a married couple. But then when we file our 2020 taxes, because technically this is based, in the end, it's going to be based on 2020 tax information. And let's just say we earned 151, we wouldn't have been eligible for the full 2,400. That's the only group of students or individuals that I've heard where this is not, where they might feel that there's a little bit of a ramification on the back end when they file their taxes next year, but it's a really, really narrow group. And for everybody else, my understanding is, as a non-tax professional, is that this will not mess with their taxes next year. Okay?
Great. And that you did touch upon it a little bit, and there's one I think that we'll want to follow up on after.
Okay.
So I think we're okay now to trudge. There's a few related to what you're going to talk about.
Okay. Okay. Great. So so really good news for college students is that there are emergency funds available for any student who is experiencing an emergency as related to anything that's happened with COVID-19. The first thing that happens was that schools were allowed to use their SEOG, their Supplementary Educational Opportunity Grant. Whoops, I think I've got the typo there, sorry. They could use those funds in a way that they might not otherwise be able to. But then additionally, and you're, I think, starting to hear this on the news. I saw a story the other day because some new supplemental information came out on Friday that institutions, and I'm talking about higher ed institutions at the moment, are receiving funding from the Federal Education Stabilization Fund. And that up to at least 50% of these funds have to be used towards emergency aid for students. So schools are getting a set amount of money, and it's based on the percentage of Pell eligible students. It's based on FTE, full-time enrollment, and probably a few other criteria. But the calculation was done to determine how much individual schools are getting. So in Maine, $41 million is coming in to higher education institutions through this Education Stabilization Fund. And 50% of that has to go to students. Has to go to students as emergency aid. And then the other half, the school has some discretion about, not that they can't use it for that purpose too, but that first 50% they have to use for student emergency aid. So what's interesting about this, for those of us who think about things in financial aid terms, is these funds are not limited to only what we call Title IV eligible students. So Title IV are all those federal financial aid funds. That's where they fall within the regulations. This is not the case. So if a school has students who never filed a FAFSA, who aren't eligible for any federal financial aid funds, that doesn't matter. These funds are not limited to only those students, including students who might not be eligible because of their citizenship status. Automatically, they're not excluded. There is a ton of debate going on as to where these funds can actually be used. And so it's going to be interesting to watch where this lands. Schools are having tons of conversations about how they are going to administer these funds. So in many cases, it's not going to go through the financial aid office. It's going to go through a whole different office, although financial aid office probably will be involved at some level. And the funds, in some school cases, they're doing funds for all students, assuming that they've all been impacted in some way. Some are categorizing, so maybe their neediest students are getting more than their less needy students. And again, not always based on they're not going to have a FAFSA for everyone, so I don't know how they're always going to know that. In some cases, there are very simple applications that schools are talking about so that they're using their funds a little bit more targeted. Schools are talking about using a good portion of the funds now, but reserving some for next year. So, this is an area where I'm going to be really vague, and probably people can feel free to ask questions. But I think we've got some details that we're still waiting to hear about, and I know the schools still have a bunch of questions. Anyone who is a podcast fan and might want to listen to NASFA, the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, I listened to it, just one they did yesterday, and they're just really trying to figure out all of this out. But what matters, I think, for all of us is that if we've got students who are impacted as a result of COVID, and whatever's gone on at their schools and whatever's gone on in their families, if they're feeling the impact, they need to reach out to their schools. I'd start with a financial aid office, especially for our students who are already receiving aid, and just ask about these funds. Working with a student recently, his issue is he lost his job. He worked off campus, because I'm going to talk about work study in a moment. And so he no longer has his income. Plus, one of his roommates, his parents had forced this other kid to move home, which as a parent I can understand. But apparently the kid's not paying his portion of the rent anymore. So what was being divided by 4 is now being divided by 3. That's a prime example of a student that we want to connect with their school, because that's exactly the sort of thing that this funding can help with, purchase of computers and things like that. Okay, so more to come on that, but have students who are being challenged financially or their families are to please reach out to their schools, because there is money there to help them. As far as work study, and again, this was probably announced a couple weeks ago, but it seems like this is old news, is that institutions did have the option to continue to pay their work study students, even if their students were unable to work. So let's just say, the school went all online, a student who normally worked in a work study job was going to go, they lived out of state or they lived wherever they live, and they no longer could do that job. Schools had the option, they aren't required to, but they had the option of continuing to pay their students their work study funds. And from what I'm hearing, I think the vast majority of schools absolutely did that. So this is probably more in the old news camp, because probably this has already been taken care of, and in many cases students are all set with this piece. But if you have a student that you're aware of that had work study funds and they weren't able to work, and that's causing a financial difficulty, even if it's not, if they were going to work study funds, be working and gaining work study funds as a result of that, we want them to be connecting with their school and having that conversation.
Violet, can I bump into you for a second?
Absolutely.
With a couple things. So just a note from one of our financial aid friends, this morning's NASFA off the cuff indicated that financial aid offices will not need to be involved in managing CARES Act funding to institutions.
Yes, I did hear that. I did hear that they don't have to be.
But they might, as
Yes, I agree. So thank you, my financial aid friend, whoever you were. Yes, I did not probably phrase that exactly as I heard that said as well. And I think, there's probably a huge relief in some ways, because I think that having other people involved in this and taking the lead on some of this is going to be good for everybody. So,
and in a related topic, do we know if these funds are going to for-profit institutions? Like particularly, we had a couple of questions about Empire, and how those institutions are going to navigate funding as well.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I saw something about a question about for-profits, and there was some concern that about that particular that question. What I would say at the moment is I saw on, I hate to shout out another, a news organization, but on the News Center page, they had a list yesterday of all of the institutions and how much money they received. So what I would say is, and I'll do this afterwards too, but just go to that page and see if like Empire's on that. It's a huge list. It's alphabetical across the nation. So it's one of those things where I didn't notice it because it wasn't grouped just by main schools. But I think seeing whether Empire and some of those other schools are on that list will give us the answer to that question.
Okay, great.
All right. And then to get into the weeds just a little bit, with Pell Grant and subsidized direct loans, there are basically limits on how long you can receive these funds. So in the case of Pell, there is what's called a lifetime eligibility used. And with subsidized loans, it's called the subsidized usage limit applies. That's what SULA is. Gotta love all this stuff, right? All these acronyms. The long and the short of it is that with subsidized Stafford loans, if you take more than 150% of your program to complete, you lose the subsidy on your direct federal loans. If you get Pell Grant and you get it for, you take more than 150% of your program to complete, then you don't have any more Pell Grant eligibility. So the long and the short of it is just really good news that students who were forced to withdraw as a result of this emergency are not going to have this semester counted against them. So the fact that they've got Pell or they got loan, subsidized loan, it's not going to count against them. And that's not a flexible thing with schools. The federal government said that's the way that it has to be. Additionally, there's something called satisfactory academic progress. It basically means that students need to be progressing through school at a certain rate and maintaining a certain GPA. Basically what they've said here is that schools can take a look at that, and they don't even need a student to appeal. So a school could look at a student and say, ooh, gosh, if this were a regular semester and the student withdrew, they'd be in trouble with their SAP. They might not continue to qualify for federal financial aid. But what this is saying is that the schools can go ahead and without even having the student initiate the appeal, they can take into account that this semester was different and exclude this semester from that calculation, again, is my understanding of that. Some cases, schools did refunds, particularly for room and board, students who were living on campus, excuse me. So if the school did refund some money, and in some cases they may have refunded tuition as well, students may have a credit balance on their account. Probably if a student was going to be moving off campus or home, in most cases, from living on campus, they probably are already aware of whether or not they were getting a refund. But if for any reason a student did move or thinks they might have gotten a refund, they want to connect with their school. Schools are handling this a little bit differently. A lot of schools are just refunding a portion and students have gotten that credit already. I have heard of some cases where instead of getting the credit immediately, it's basically a credit for a future semester, which I hope that's not happening as much, but I have heard that that's happening. So regardless, if the student got a refund on anything for this semester, they just need to be sure they're connecting with their school, hopefully getting that credit now, but asking any questions that they need to of the school so they know what to expect going forward. All right, I don't think this probably applies to a huge number of our students, but let's just say that a student's room and board was covered through their 529 plan, any 529 plan. And let's just say that part of their room and board was refunded. Because that money didn't cover a qualified educational expense, because again, it was refunded, so the family got that money back, those funds would be, you'd have to pay taxes on the earnings on those funds, and you might have a penalty because you didn't use it for educationally related expenses. Again, I don't think this is going to be something that's of a concern to many families, but if you are someone who 529 plans were used to cover an expense and that expense was refunded to you, then you want to be sure that you're aware of the fact that if you put that money back into your account, the portion that was covering those now non-qualified expenses, you can do that, and that will take care of, or should take care of, any of the tax implications. Typically, you have to do that within 60 days, but this has been extended, so you can see the language there as to kind of when you can make a recontribution and not have it impact the tax assessment and all of that. So bottom line is, if you use 529 funds, you got some of them refunded, you should talk with your tax accountant or your 529 plan administrator to make sure you know what to do so that there's not an unexpected tax liability. Okay, glad to move off that one. And then I want to talk just briefly about appeals. We want to be sure that students and families are appealing their situation, their financial aid award, if need be. One of the things we're always a little bit surprised to hear, which I guess we shouldn't be because we live in this world, but that sometimes students don't realize that they can appeal, and students can always appeal. You know, it doesn't mean their appeal will be approved, but anytime a student feels like they need to have their financial aid relooked at, they can do that. It's just that this is not new. But we just really, really want to emphasize now that we want to be sure that any families that are experiencing some sort of financial situation that's impacting their ability to pay for school is talking with their college. And this applies to college students right now that are already enrolled, but also our seniors in high school who are looking to go to college in the fall or some sort of post-secondary education in the fall and have had their financial world kind of turned upside down. We want them to be talking with their colleges as well. And ideally, we want them to be talking with their colleges sooner rather than later so that they can make their decisions about next fall. In the world of financial aid, we call these financial aid appeals. We call them special circumstances in some cases. We call them a professional judgment review. So all of those basically mean the same thing. They mean that the student reaches out to the school, tells the school about something that the school might not be aware of. The school will either have the student complete a form or write a letter to explain their situation, and usually documentation of that is required. Schools then will take a look at that on a case-by-case basis and make a determination of what should be done next. And maybe the student would be eligible. That's our hope always, that the student might be eligible for more financial aid. So these have always existed, but now more than ever, we want to be sure that students who need to do that are doing that. And I know my financial aid friends out there are like, oh my gosh, they're just swamped and inundated with this. But I know they too want to be sure that students let them know about changes in circumstances. And then last but not least, I've got two more quick little things here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jess. On the admissions side of things, for our high school students, many schools have moved the May 1 decision deposit date to June 1st. So you can check with your school or have your students check with the school to see if that date has been moved. In other cases, I've seen that schools are not moving the date, but they are absolutely willing to be flexible. So if a student can't make a decision by May 1 because of everything that's going on, they should reach out to their schools to ask for an extension. And see what they are willing to do. Maria, as a former UMF student, we loved this. We saw that UMF is doing something very special with their deposits. And I think the deposit amount now is what, $20.20? Wasn't that what we saw, Maria? $20.20. So I thought that was really great. So schools are trying to be super flexible. So reach out to schools if there's any questions or any concerns about any of that. Most schools are closed to visitors and not doing, campus visits, but they are doing a lot of virtual tours. So check with your schools, check on their websites and see what they have available. A great source of information about both deposit dates and admission events is the NEACAC website. And that website just has some fabulous information, and it does a great job of saying, for these schools, kind of here's what's going on. So I thought that would be a great resource for those of you who are having questions about some of that. High school students, the SATs for March were canceled. For May, they were canceled. The in-school testing was canceled, and they're unsure of June at the moment, is what I saw when I checked on Tuesday again. For more information about the SATs, visit the College Board SAT site. I know schools are aware of this. I've seen something about the University of Maine system, and they're obviously aware that students were not able to take their SATs in April as planned and are accommodating that. So ask your schools specific questions if you have them. The AP tests are about ready to start, I guess. I remember them being in May with my kiddo, and so those are going to be done online. So, I think it's going to be very different than in the past, but, those students have been in those classes probably, all year long. So,
Mila, I don't mean to interrupt you, but a whole bunch of people just said they just canceled the June SAT.
Oh, well, there you go. So good. I mean, not good. No, not good, but okay, good. I'm glad that you jumped on and said that. Yes, because what's today? Wednesday, right? I checked on Monday. So yes. Okay. Thank you so much. So no June SAT, everyone. So I will, I already sent you the presentation. So, I'll keep that in mind. And so more information about the AP tests. They've got some great information, even for parents, on how this is all going to work. So you can visit that site as well. And then last but not least in my section, I just wanted to talk about the fact that there are some financial education resources out there. FAME, we have a partnership with iGrad, and they have created just some super resources that are available. And so we encourage you to go visit the site, sign up for an account, go to FAME-igrad.com. They're free accounts. Anyone can sign up. Many of our college students are already working with their colleges and have an iGrad account, but anyone can do this. And iGrad even has wellness coaches that are available via email or chat. And then there's some many other resources. Mary Dyer actually did this slide for me. And so many other resources there as well. We've been talking a lot at FAME as the College Access and Financial Education team that, this crisis has really shown, how people taking advantage of tools, being prepared, all of that, how necessary that is. And, it's such a difficult time under the best of circumstances. And so knowing where to turn to be able to figure out how to deal with some of the financial crisis that people are dealing with, these resources are a really good place to start. So I will stop there, Maria. Anything for me before we turn it over to Jess?
Yes, just a question and a note of clarification. So we had a question about particularly 529 funds. So if someone used a small amount of 529 funds to pay the bill, so less than tuition, can we assume it was applied to tuition first and not to room and board? Therefore, they will not have to send the refund back to 529 plan.
Milo Tappan, not answering on behalf of FAME, says yes. And I know Martha's out there and my boss is out there. So yes, Milo Tappan says yes, but not on behalf of FAME.
Great. And just a quick note of clarification for related to the repayment question about can you still pay on your loans even though payments are suspended? We want to remind in school, students are in school that are borrowers probably don't want to make their payments now, but it's specific to folks in repayment. That was one of.
Although they could. There's nothing that prevents them, but they weren't anyway, so they didn't already have that built into their budget. But hey, if one of them wanted to take their $1,200 check that they're not getting typically, but if they weren't claimed by someone else, so they do get that check, they certainly could do that. And
I found, shout out to Deborah for sharing this link with me. I put in the chat for all panelists and attendees to see the link from ed.gov of all the lists of schools that got and how much money they got. So the link for that is there.
Okay.
And then related to appeals, we just want to remind folks that they can talk to their financial aid office and do appeals for current year, projected year income, and really make the case for what has happened in calendar year 2019.
Exactly. But the only thing I will say, and this is just projecting out until October, that when we hit next October, I just want to remind everyone, when we file FAFSAs next October, we're still going to have to use 2019 income. So that question will come up. We initially always use the base year information and then do appeals from that. So so I just wanted to, because that will be what will be the next thing we'll have to talk a lot about. But for now, absolutely follow up with the financial aid office, current students, next year students, etc. Jess, I have given the controls over to you. So I'm going to make you put you up here on video as well. And let's see. There you go. Turn myself off. There we go.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So, hi guys. My section of the presentation is maybe a little less meaty, a little more fun. So I got the good stuff today. But really, we're just talking about what you guys can do to support your students and what we can do to support you along the way. So as we kind of head through what could be the rest of, I know for some schools, they've already made the decision that we're looking at the remainder of the academic year, not being face-to-face. So what are the things we should still be supporting our students around, or how can we help you do that? So So one of the big ones is students still need to file their FAFSAs. And I know hopefully many of them got it done before all of this happened, but we do know that our overall FAFSA filing rate for this year is down over last year. So we know there are many students who haven't kind of gone through that process yet. And I think this situation makes it a little harder for them because they don't feel the regular presence of their school counselors or their teachers reminding them about the process, or they're not necessarily hearing from their friends about the financial aid packages that they're receiving, and they're not getting all of that stuff. So really reminding students that they still need to be completing the FAFSA, even if they're not sure what their plan is for next year, whether they just don't know where they're going to go, or they don't even know if they're going to go to school next year, they should still be completing their FAFSA. Most schools now have access to our FAFSA portal. So most high schools are able to check on which students in their senior class have filed their FAFSA and which have not, and maybe who has some things that they still need to complete in that FAFSA process. So if you are not aware of that list at your school, certainly talk to the school counseling office and find out who's got access to that list. And there's no downside to filing that FAFSA, and it certainly keeps all of those options open for students. And if you really want a good push, we are not, at this point, we are not changing the Maine State Grant deadline. So that is still going to be May 1st. So we really want students to think of the next 2 weeks as, FAFSA time, right? If they haven't done it yet, this is the time. So if you have students who have not filed that FAFSA, know that you can go online to file the FAFSA at FAFSA.gov. So that's the traditional way that most students file. So you're able to log in as the student and go through that whole process. But in addition to FAFSA.gov, we also have the student aid phone app, or the app you can download onto your iPad or your cell phone. There's both Android and iPhone capable versions of that app. So you can download it. And so even a student who may not have great internet access at home right now, most of them still have cell access. So cellular service, so they'll be able to file their entire FAFSA over the phone. And I will tell you, I've done it with several students. There are some of my high schools that I work in that when I go to do a FAFSA lab, the students are really just pulling out their phone because they don't have regular computers that they have access to for different reasons. And it's pretty smooth. It's not a bad way to do it. I'd encourage FAFSA.gov first, the web version, but if you need to, that app works great. Oops, back we go. So we have lots of help out there, so certainly feel free to check out our website at FAME-maine.com/FAFSA. We have the 3 steps in the financial aid process there, really understanding what that looks like. We have a recorded walkthrough of filing the FAFSA. We have animations on filing the FAFSA. We have tons of support for you and your students in understanding the process or just feeling comfortable and encouraging them. Certainly students and school counselors and parents can call us at FAME at any time, Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30. So that's our 800 number, 1-800-228-3734, or email us at education@famemaine.com. The education email address will go right to our customer service team. But if you want to talk to one of us on the CAFE team, on the college access team, we have our emails here as well. So we all cover a different portion of the state and different populations. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. We are here as a resource for you. So we are not out doing financial aid nights the same way we used to. I'm not going into classrooms doing Claim Your Future. So this is, I love to get families on the phone or on a Zoom call to have these conversations to help them through this process. So please feel completely free to share our contact information with your students. Other things that you can do to support your students today is to encourage your students to start looking at researching careers. So one of the websites that we think is pretty great, so if you've been to one of my presentations, I talk about this one a lot, it's Career One Stop. I think that the federal government has done a great job kind of building that website, designing it. It has fantastic kind of interest surveys that will give you an idea of what kinds of careers you might be interested in, but also videos. So I use them with my 7th and 8th grader when they're thinking about what they want to do for careers. We go and look at the videos and they get to kind of, hear from somebody else in that job, what that looks like. So it's a really great resource. And not only is it a fantastic resource for students, Career One Stop has created a whole section now for resources for everyone. So not, for the students that I'm talking to via Zoom, Many of them are at home with their parents right now all day long. And a lot of parents are, potentially laid off or have other things, things have changed for them. There are tons of resources on Career One Stop. So there's certainly information about COVID, but also, I love the career changer. So starting to think about the skills that you have now, what other careers might they lead you to? So what are your other options? So if you were laid off or, so I will say, I had a conversation with my husband last night about how successful the in-home premieres of movies have been. So they've been saying how, like, the Trolls premiere of the new movie was a hit. So they made a ton of money releasing it directly to people's homes. What will this mean for the history of movies if they decide to do that in the future? So movie theaters. So we may see this entire thing kind of change a number of different careers that are out there. So this is a great resource for students and for parents and anybody else who's kind of thinking about this stuff right now. Another thing we can do is to talk to them about exploring their higher ed options. So looking at what colleges are out there and who can offer the degree programs that they're looking for. Encourage students to build that list of schools so they have time to do this, maybe more time than they would have. We talk all the time about senior year being so busy, and not that they don't still have a lot to do, but they've got a little bit more time. So, and a little bit more flexibility in their schedule. Encourage them to visit Big Future or College Navigator and really start building that list. So most colleges now have some version of a virtual campus tour. And I know admissions representatives are more than happy to talk to students now and have those conversations. So, take advantage of the supports that are out there. You can also encourage students, or you can do activities around learning about the financial aid process. So certainly on our website at FAME-administered.com, we have spent years curating a fantastic list of resources and things that are out there for you. So one of the big things I would say is, usually at this time of year, my car is filled with pay publications. So those are the books that are kind of like our financial aid Bibles. It's the financial aid process, start to finish, and all the ins and outs. I am not handing those to families like I usually am at this time of year, but we still have a bunch of them. So please encourage your students to request them so they can go to our publications page. They go to FAME-administered.com, publications. They can either download the PDF or they can ask us to mail them one, and we have a bunch of things we can mail them. So encourage them to have that stuff mailed to them so that they have a copy of it and can really be thinking about this stuff. We also have a bunch of videos that are fantastic. So I just went through with one of my high schools, all of the videos we've got fantastic animations that are less than 10 minutes. So if you're looking like for an assignment that you as a school counselor could offer your students or as a teacher, have them watch a video and offer their response. So there's some cool stuff out there. Check out our videos. We have a scholarship search tool. We have tools and calculators, so tons of things for students to kind of really sink their teeth into when it comes to this. Feel free also to talk to us. So call us and talk about scheduling online workshops for your students. So I have been doing several of those. I can do them during the daytime, and so can the rest of the team. So we can do them in the daytime. We can do them in the evenings. I have one school that's having me record it. So I'm just recording it. That's a little more tailored for their school. So I'll mention the high school. I'll call them out. I'll use the school counselors' names so the students watching the presentation feel that closeness to the topic. So we're happy to do that kind of stuff for you. Reach out and have those conversations. And visit college websites. Encourage them to visit college websites and do those net price calculators. And then go to the tools and calculators page on our website and print the comparing financial aid packages worksheet. And they can actually use the net price calculator and put those packages that they're seeing side by side and really look at what they're getting for financial aid from colleges or what the potential is and start having those conversations. So great stuff in learning about financial aid.
Just 1 second. I am putting the link to the publications page in the chat for everyone. So they have that right there.
Right. So, and now supporting students around the topic of scholarships. So again, scholarships is something I talk about a lot, and we have lots of great resources on our website, but if there was ever a time when more students are going to need scholarships more than ever, And when students have more time to actually maybe do and get some of these things done, this is a great opportunity to really look at what scholarships are out there. So we have the FAME scholarship search, the Maine-based scholarship search. So it's all of the scholarships for Maine students. Maine Community Foundation also has on their website a large number of scholarships just for Maine students. But we'd encourage you to check out College Board. So Big Future has a scholarship search. I will also say, I didn't put it on here, I forgot, iGrad. So I'm going to mention iGrad in a minute. iGrad has a fantastic scholarship search as well. So, and then Going Merry is a really fun one. Going Merry allows you to create a profile and upload parts and pieces for your scholarship search. So you can upload high school transcripts, you can upload letters of recommendation, and it's all there in this kind of Going Merry account. And then you can just kind of click on things and put them into the applications for the scholarships you want to send things out to. So it saves students a lot of time and energy using the Going Merry app. Look for ways to make it fun too. So I know with my junior high students, they're getting all kinds of scavenger hunt related stuff. So how do you do research and, encouraging, our website and these kinds of scholarship stuff, these are great scavenger hunt material or different things like that. So if you're looking for some ideas about activities to do with students around these, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you come up with some. Another thing you can be encouraging students on today is kind of looking at some of the financial literacy topics. And so again, on our publications page, we have our Manage publication. That publication includes topics like budgeting and saving and planning and setting goals and all of that stuff. I would say for a lot of students today, their families are not necessarily talking about this stuff with their kiddos. So it's a great topic to kind of encourage them on. We also have Claim Your Future. Again, I am often at this time of year spending lots of time in middle schools playing Claim Your Future, but the online Claim Your Future at claimyourfuture.com is also a fantastic resource for high school students as well. So with the online version, you're going to be able to kind of go through the process. You'll be able to go through the process and it will automatically assign you a career, or you can choose your own career, and then you can budget for a month in the life of a person in that career. So it really lets them kind of hands-on start looking at how they're going to afford some of this stuff in the real world. So other resources, Maine Jumpstart has a fantastic database of games and videos and activities and lesson plans all around the topic of financial literacy. So definitely check them out if you haven't before. And then iGrad has a ton of resources. So again, it's fame.igrad.com. You can sign up for your own account. It is free. And any of the high school students can do the same. So you can go ahead and certainly many of the college students here in Maine already have their own accounts, but if they don't, they can sign up for free as well. So fantastic resource there. All right. Maria, questions for me?
Nothing that's popped up. As I said, I put the publications link in there. So I think we are all set to wrap up.
Beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We really, really appreciate you taking your time to join us. And we're here for you. We continue to be, so let us know what we can do to help. And we hope you're all doing well and staying safe. And until next time, okay?
Great to chat with you,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. I just stopped the recording. All right, I'm going to end the meeting, okay?
Bye.
Thank you. We'll see you later.